Hello. You are listening to the Carroll Connection with your host, Jared Carroll.
What is up, everybody? Welcome to the Carroll Connection. I am your host, Jared Carroll, here to bring you guys another great episode. Guess what this episode is? Episode 100. We did it. We have reached a huge milestone in podcasting. Episode 100. I can't describe how I'm feeling. Before I really get into this episode, this episode is titled Episode 100, Thank You. I did want to take a chance to shout out last week's episode 99 with Yulana Kotavo. Fantastic individual. She is so fucking talented, and she's going to make some waves in social media content, and especially she's a holistic practitioner. We talked about why she got into that, and we also talked about how she came from Belarus at age 7. She moved over with her family, and that's such a crazy experience. You guys need to go check that episode out at thecarrollconnection.simplecast.com. Also available Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all the major listening platforms. But man, episode 100. We did it. We reached it. I never thought I'd make it past 10 episodes. Here I am sitting behind a microphone for the 100th time, recording an episode for the Carroll Connection. Thank you. Thank you to everyone that truly actually believed in the concept and the platform that I was creating. Thank you to everyone that has tuned in and listened. And a huge fucking thank you to every single individual that has sat across from me on a podcast and recorded. It's not easy to do. It's not easy to talk about yourself. It's not easy to talk about traumas that you may have experienced in life. It's not easy to talk about shortcomings. But each individual that has sat across from me has done that. They have talked about their life, their story, and what they've gone through in hopes that someone may hear it and relate and actually get something from what they're saying. Because I always say on this podcast that everyone has a message. Everyone's life is valuable. Everyone's story should be told. And I never thought while doing this podcast that this podcast would be that. I originally thought I'd talk to business owners, content creators, and I talk to whoever and whatever. Or whoever about whatever. We just dive into these concepts about life and what it means to chase your passion and your purpose and family and mental health. The concepts get deep here. We've laughed. We've cried. We've gotten angry on the podcast talking about past experiences. All these different conversations. I always say when people come on the podcast that I can picture every single person who sat across me at this table or other tables where I've recorded in different environments, and it flashes right in front of me, just like right before I hit the record button. And I think about each person, and I think about the way that they made me feel after doing that podcast. The way that I would feel after recording a podcast is, you can't describe it. People who are passionate about stuff, you know what I'm talking about. There's just this euphoria feeling that you get after doing something that you love to do. And as I'm recording this episode, this might be the most passionate that I've ever been on a solo podcast. Because if you guys truly listen to my solos, you know that I hate doing solos. But I felt it was fitting for episode 1 to go in to this how I started, by myself. Because it's a lonely road when doing podcasting or YouTube, being a YouTuber or a TikToker, a Twitch streamer, a fitness trainer, a musician. I could go down the list of the people that I've interviewed on this podcast that actually put themselves out there in a light where you could be judged by people. It's not easy. There are so many days where I thought that I don't know if I can keep doing this. Maybe this is my last episode. Maybe I just give up. I'm not fucking leaving. to quote Wolf of Wall Street. I love doing this. I want to see where this can go, where I can take this. In 2.5 years, I have created a podcast studio. I have a backdrop. I have a roadcaster. I have new microphones. I have lights. I have a camera. I didn't think about this when I started on day one. Back in November of 2019, my life was chaos. I didn't know what the fuck to think or where I was going, but I knew I needed a plan. I knew I needed to do something. So I started to research how to start a podcast. All these different things come up, all these different sites and where to go, how to do it. And I researched, I looked, I started thinking about names and what I'm going to talk about and how to record them and all these different little details that you don't really think about when you think about creating a podcast. And I started getting into it and I was like, yo, I think I could do this. I think I could create content. And I was always like, and I talked about this multiple times on this podcast, so I'm sorry if you guys are over me talking about this, but I have to talk on the podcast like I'm talking to new viewers or new listeners. And when I was starting out, I wanted to create a platform where people would feel comfortable coming on and talking to me. And I do want to quickly go into the list that I have of individuals from all the way from episode 1 through. And I want to give a shout out to the first 10 people who came on this podcast. Specifically, I think I had a solo in there, so maybe it's 9. But those 10 people, or 9, like I said, you guys didn't know what the fuck I was going to do. And you took a chance on me. You gave me an opportunity to help you tell your story and show it to everyone out there when you didn't know what the fuck I was going to do with it. So, gotta start it off with my main man, Eric Lazito. Thank you so much for being episode 1. He's been on another time as well. And one of my closest friends. I appreciate him so much. And he's going to do huge things in the cannabis industry. Please go check his episodes out. Follow him. He's an amazing individual, good person. Huge shout out to him. Episode 2, James Carroll Sr., my late grandfather. Rest in peace. I love you. I miss you. A lot of what I'm doing here is because that episode, and I don't want to get emotional on the podcast, but I had my grandmother reach out after I talked a couple times on the podcast about I might stop doing this after I hit 100. And when we talked for a little bit, just exchanged text, and she wanted me to get my dad on, which I do eventually want to do. I really thought about it. Why would you stop at 100? Why would you stop here? The whole internal motivation was always he wants you to keep going. My grandfather would want you to keep doing this. Keep sharing your story and everyone else around you that wants to be a part of this journey. So I'm not leaving. I'm not stopping. And I think I was just feeling emotional. I wasn't being really logical. I think I was just talking what came to my mind as you do on podcast. But when I really thought about it, I'm not stopping this. There's no way in hell I would stop this. Episode 3, Carrie Peterson Weaver, my cousin, shout out to her. That was such a vulnerable episode to talk about her mother's passing, as well as dealing with how she was paralyzed by a drunk driver. It's crazy that you guys gave me a chance, especially those first 3 episodes. I didn't have any content out before that. You guys had nothing to go on. I was just winging it. I wasn't even really a good podcast host. I didn't know what the fuck I was doing. And you guys gave me a chance. Episode 4, Kate Abrams, a day 1. Shout out, Kate. Been on multiple times. I can't thank you enough. You really believed in me. You really sent me a lot of motivational things as I've gone on this journey. And we always talk social media and so many car rides that we just would talk about life, and you'd support me as I was going through my own things and vice versa. Straight up day 1. Can't thank you enough. Episode 5, Zach Carter and Rob Fontaine. Zach's been on multiple times, and shout out Rob. You guys really, my first duo episode, that was, I'm pretty sure it's the top 5 episodes still. And you guys trust me, and I appreciate that. Episode 6, my man, Brock Handy. I'm planning to bring him back in the future. Again, thank you. My 7th episode was a year in review for 2019. Episode 8, Tracy Carroll Corcoran, my aunt. Thank you so much for giving me a chance to talk about your story, what you've gone through, what it's like to be a mother, a teacher, a leader. That was such a fantastic episode. Episode 9, my guy, Matt Medeiros, owns with him and his family as well, Apotha Therapeutics. Go check them out in Plainville, Massachusetts. We talked so many big things on that episode that have come to fruition. And Matt talked the talk and walked the walk, man. Like, if you go back and listen to episode 9, which was January 13th of 2020, when I dropped it, the concepts and what we were talking about back then, Apotha Therapeutics the building wasn't even made yet. And he made that shit happen even with the pandemic happening back in like March of 2020. Can't think of enough. And another huge thank you to Alex Medeiros, with 2 X's, episode 10. I love Alex. Always stood up for me, especially when people have criticized my podcast. He is someone that has stood up for me, and I can't thank him enough. Like, I can't thank, and I could go list on and on and on. There's hundreds of episodes, over close to probably 80 to 90 different individuals, because I've done solo episodes of people that I could talk about and thank. But I'm gonna kind of not like cherry pick, but talk about a few. Jake Wickham, Dylan Wickham, I love you guys, my cousins. We did the Quarantine Connection when everything seemed dire, and I didn't know if I was going to continue doing podcasting, and you guys were like, yeah, we're still down to record content, and we just kept making shit happen. And Jake's been on a couple times, and thank you guys for believing in me and giving me the opportunity to talk to you guys and keep pushing content. Like, amazing. Let me go through and quickly look at this, and there's so many great people. I'm looking at all these different episodes, and I just blows my mind when I read all these names. And I just can't believe that this is the 100th episode. And I gotta give a huge shout out to Wally at the Ever Changing Vibe. He was at episode 50. I'm not going to name drop him. You guys can go check out episode 50 and hear his personal life stories, but I'm going to talk about him as Wally because that's his Ever Changing Vibe identity. And he's someone that we've bounced off so many ideas with each other. And he got into podcasting shortly after coming onto my podcast. He did a few other appearances on different podcasts, and he was Twitch streaming for a little bit. And when I saw him start doing his content, it kind of added some extra motivation for me to continue doing what I was doing. And we even did some collabs, and a lot of the Rodecaster and the light setup and the camera setup, a lot of it, whether he knows it or not, is to you. Thank you. I appreciate everything that we've done together, are going to do together. Podcasting is about creating connections, hence the name. So, Wally, if you listen to this episode, thank you so much. I literally can't thank you enough for being part of my life, and I appreciate you probably more than you realize. And another individual, I believe it was episode 73 with Claudia Valenzuela. Man, Claudia, thank you so much. You share almost everything that I post, constantly giving me motivational tips, keep going, especially when I hurt my knee. You're slow and steady, you got this. You're a huge inspiration. You are changing lives. You make a difference. You matter. I wouldn't be able to do what I do without someone like you. Also, shout out Jeff LePage. I want to say that was episode 34. And Jeff was a huge supporter very early on. He just got home from a deployment, and thank you for your service. And he was always such a huge believer in what I do, and he wanted the time to collect his thoughts before he came on the podcast, and he was so articulate. And thank you, Jeff. That was it was an amazing feeling to know that I had someone close to me that actually really cared about what I was doing and listened to each episode. It would give me feedback. A lot of people, I don't even know if they listen. And you would give me actual feedback. Oh, I like what this person said, and I related to this concept. And man, that shit went so far with me. I really appreciate that. And shout out people who've been on twice. Andrew Brown, been on episode 32, and I think it was 82 with Jake. You guys have been on twice. Thank you. K. Lou, love you. You're amazing. Thank you for coming on twice. Mike Braga Jr., thank you for coming on twice. John Sisto, you came on twice. Like, the fact that people were willing to come back on and sit with me and record an episode again kind of validated what I've been doing. And it's crazy that people want to be a part of this. I'm creating a network that I've always talked about of genuine relationships that can go beyond just the, hey, how are you doing? Like, these are people that I feel comfortable hitting up and contacting and be like, hey, what's your advice on this? What are you doing here? Like, and I don't need to talk to everybody every single day. That's not the thought process with a lot of this. Is these people believed in what I was doing and they continue to. And by coming back on, they're supporting it. So thank you. Thank you to everyone that has ever shared my podcast, shared a post, listened to it, talk shit about it, and most importantly, been a guest on my podcast. It takes a lot of courage and vulnerability to sit across from me behind a camera with microphones and talk about your life story. It's not easy. At first, I struggle with it a lot, but I always give kudos to people who can do it and are willing to, and especially the ones who ask to come do it. That's the coolest thing in the world. I've met so many amazing people who I didn't know prior to this podcast that wanted to come on because they heard someone else that they knew came on and they liked what we were talking about. Mental health is something that's so important to so many different people, including myself. And to have created a platform that has kind of been centered around that, where I can advocate for mental health awareness and share people's stories with you guys, and you guys can take bits and pieces to different life stories and apply it to your own life and get some lessons from it. Anyone that does something passionately will understand this. The feeling that I get post-podcast is unlike anything else. So much euphoria and joy, where I just feel so appreciative and grateful that I live in this era where I can do something like this, where I have the privilege to do something like this. I feel so lucky. I feel so blessed. I don't want to make this like a super long episode, but I wanted to come into this kind of how I started, like I said earlier. Started episode 1, or I should say the intro, and I didn't know what the fuck this was going to be. I had no clue. And a lot of people have asked, why have you never updated your intro? And my kind of response to that is to show myself. It's not really for other people, but to show myself where I came from, where I started. So I talk about my age, and I think I was 24 at the time when I started recording the podcast. I'm currently 26, will be 27 in November. And so yeah, it was 20, because I think it was recently my birthday or right before. And a lot of the stuff that I envisioned on that intro still applies to what I'm talking about and what I'm doing and where I'm going with this podcast. So I don't want to change that. Maybe I will one day to make it more professional and more aligned with the concepts and discussions that I've had on my podcast since episode 1. But I've had to learn. Just like anyone else who starts something new, you got to learn, you got to experience, you got to try new things, and that's part of the journey that you go through as you're becoming this new person, is being willing to grow, being willing to adapt, take criticism, and understand that not everyone is going to support you. I've said this multiple times. A lot of time that your biggest supporters are not going to be your family and friends. And you have to let that emotion behind that go. You're not entitled to anyone's views. You're not entitled to anyone's likes, shares. You're not even entitled to interviews if you do podcasting like myself. You're entitled to nothing in this life. What you can do is work really, really hard, be consistent, show up, and be a good person. You can only control what you can control. So when you're getting into this space of I want to be on social media, embrace that shit. Full force, go right into it. And make sure that you thank everyone along the way that helped you. Don't turn your back on people because that's some shady shit. Always make sure that you're there and you're open to people who were a part of your journey along the way. And if they turn into a hater, don't hate back. Just, if they hate, you create. Shout out to Fresh and Fit. It's one of my favorite podcasts. I know they're very controversial. Same thing with Joe Rogan. Another two podcasts that have been huge inspirations in what I do. But when they hate, you create. Don't talk about other people. Talk about ideas. Be better than those people. Don't stoop down to that level. Because I can tell you for a fact, I guarantee people talk shit when I first started this podcast. I guarantee people didn't support the idea of what I was doing. They didn't see where I was going with this. Even my own family, there was a lot of questions of like what you're doing, how you're doing it. You swear too much. Like, how can you keep going with this? You fight through that. Don't listen to the outside noise. Listen to your inner thoughts. What are they saying to you? What are they saying to you? Really dig deep into what you're doing and how you're doing it. Seriously, it sounds cliche, it sounds corny, but you seriously gotta look inwards to figure out, what am I passionate about? What's my purpose? And sometimes your passion and your purpose are not going to be aligned. You might be passionate about fitness, but your purpose might be legit like helping people at charities and doing like food banks and stuff like that. And maybe you could find a way to get your purpose and passion aligned, but they're not always going to be like that. And it's okay to work 9-to-5 jobs. It's okay to still live with their parents. Like, it's okay to be not where everyone else is. Enjoy the moment, enjoy the experience, but continue to work hard. Envision the life that you want, research it, plan, and execute. So many people get caught up in social media, the comparisons, and I do it too. I'm human. We're all human. We all experience these different emotions, that this jealousy or envy that this person might be getting views that you're not, or they might be getting likes that you're not. Who cares? When I do this podcast, I don't think about who listens. I really don't. I think about what I'm doing in this moment with this person who's sitting across the table from me, or people. I block out the extra shit and I focus on the relationship right in front of me. Who is in front of me? Taking care of them, making them feel comfortable, making them feel vulnerable, and allowing them to express themselves in however they want. I'm not trying to control a narrative. I'm not trying to control anything. I thought about writing notes down before this podcast, and I was not going to, because that's not how I do this. Straight off the head, freestyle. That's the way I've always done this podcast. That's the way I always want to keep going with this podcast. That's how we do it. It's the Carroll Connection, episode 100. Thank you. Like I'm not going to go too long with this episode. As you guys know, my solo episodes tend to be very journal session-ish, but I kind of vocalize it. And I guess I'll start kind of wrapping it up, but again, thank you to every single individual that has sat across from me and recorded a podcast. Thank you to every single person that has given my podcast a listen, has given it a chance. I would be nowhere without you guys. I even hit 10,000 listens. So if you really do the math on that, this is episode 100, averages out to about 100 listens per episode. That's crazy. That many people would tune in to a kid from a small town with a big mouth just talking about his life and his feelings. Trying to get other people to express themselves, to allow people to not be afraid, to be themselves. Be you. That's all you can be. You can't control anything else in this life. All you can control is your thoughts and who you are and who you want to be. I wanted to be someone that advocates for mental health. I wanted to be someone who advocates for positivity. I wanted to be someone who's motivational. I want to be someone who's inspiring. And I wake up every day trying to be grateful for what I have and who I am, my family, my relationships. And you're going to have bad days. You're going to stumble along the way. But you get up, you shake it off, You keep going. You be consistent. That's how I reached episode 100. I consistently sat behind this microphone week in and week out and did the shit. I took breaks when I needed to, respected my mental health, respected my emotions, but I never quit. I continue to do this because I love to do this. So when you figure out something that you love to do it. And I always make fun of people who say, just do it. When I ask my question of what would your advice be to someone who wants to pursue their passion? It's cliche, but it is so true. You need to just do it. Plan and execute. Be consistent. I'll hit that 1,000 times as be fucking consistent. I don't hit episode 100 if I'm not a consistent individual. If I'm not hardworking, if I don't spend hours of editing, spend hours of setting up the podcast, hours scheduling with people, hours actually sitting across talking to people, because what you guys hear is an hour of a conversation. I could spend up to 4, 5, 6, 7 hours with people. I love this shit. I will continue to love this shit. I will continue pushing a positive message and trying to make change in my community. And if I make change globally, fantastic. When I started this podcast, I just wanted to have purpose and passion. I wanted to have purpose in this life. I wanted my life to mean something. Because God forbid, if I ever go, you guys always have this. You always have record of me expressing myself, talking about how I feel, and being me, authentically me. And not too many people can say they do that or have something like that. Recorded conversations of how I thought in the moment, just being me. And that's all who I'll ever be is Jared M. Carroll. I think that's going to start wrapping it up for episode 100. Thank you. You guys got to check out all my other episodes. I've had so many fucking amazing guests, like I've said multiple times in this episode. You can check it out at carrollconnection.simplecast.com. Also available Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all the major listening platforms. So, till next time, guys. Peace.